Yotsuya Yusuke is a cold, distant appearance and emotionless person who makes others easily sense his indifference and despair towards life. He possesses no special talents, doesn't stand out in crowds, and is somewhat eccentric and withdrawn. Day after day, Yusuke regularly attends school and quietly returns to his small room, where he spends most of his time playing video games, the only hobby that can help his mood escape the boredom of real life. Despite living such a reclusive life, Yusuke has developed feelings for Shindo Yu, the school's perfect student, a girl who is good in both appearance and academic performance, who stands at the completely opposite end of the social spectrum from him. In a moment, while performing cleaning duty, Yusuke's eyes inadvertently glance towards Shindo, and he thinks to himself that he has no chance of even talking to her. However, at that moment, something unexpected happened. Just as the blackboard in the classroom suddenly displays images of strange flowers, Yusuke's entire body begins to fade and gradually disappears into the other dimension. He is suddenly transported to a strange land, an imaginary world filled with giant creatures and many oddly shaped monsters. Although their size and presence could easily frighten anyone, strangely, they don't immediately rush to attack Yusuke. Before he can understand what's happening, Yusuke meets Shindo, the girl he secretly admires, and another classmate named Hakozaki. It turns out both of them have experienced this strange teleportation before, so they appear completely calm, as if traveling between dimensions is no longer surprising to them. Shortly after, a figure with a bizarre appearance, a gaunt body, and grotesque face appears, frightening Yusuke. However, this character turns out to be the guide for the group of students serving as a game master in the mission world they've been pulled into. He is the one who gives Yusuke and his two friends the necessary instructions to survive in this place. The three are assigned an important mission entrusted by the village chief. They had only 14 days to complete the assigned task. After each challenge they overcome, their team will be supplemented with a new teammate. This might seem like it would make the journey easier, but the reality is not so simple. The more people join, the greater the difficulty, bringing countless unforeseen dangers. In his first battle, Yusuke pays a heavy price for his lack of experience and impulsive action. However, the game system allows resurrection within 30 seconds as long as at least one member of the group survives. Thanks to this, he quickly returns, carrying a sense of failure and a clear awareness that he needs to be a better person. He cannot continue relying on others if he wants to survive. Utilizing his intelligence and reflexes learned from video games, Yusuke devises a plan to blow dust to obscure the monster's vision, then suddenly rushes forward, sacrificing himself to create an opportunity for Shindo and Hakozaki to attack. Although all three are defeated immediately afterward, as long as one of them revives before the time limit, the resurrection cycle will continue to operate. Thanks to this rule, the group finally manages to defeat the first monster they encounter. After each mission, the system allows them to ask one question to learn more about this world. In previous attempts, Shindo and Hakozaki had been curious about who was behind all this. The answer they received was a surprising one. Those controlling the game all come from the future, a dimension beyond the understanding of the current world. The true purpose of the game remains unclear. They know they are just small pawns in a larger chess game. After somewhat grasping the nature of this strange world, Yusuke decides to train his combat skills on his own. Instead of continuing to rely on his teammates, he ventures into the deep forest where monsters roam the darkness to train his physical strength and courage. However, during his absence, a tragedy occurs. When Yusuke returns, he witnesses a terrifying scene. Both Shindo and Hakozaki lying on the ground, their bodies covered in blood. The one responsible for this massacre is a giant creature. At the moment Yusuke witnesses his two teammates fall into the brutal claws of the monster, Yusuke realizes that if he is also eliminated at that moment, the entire team will disappear permanently. With no right to be reborn, no chance to start over. This thought compels him to struggle to his feet despite his body still trembling with fear. Under the moonlight, Yusuke tries to drag the dying Hakozaki forward while continuously speaking words of reassurance. He urges Shindo to leave the dangerous area and head to the nearest village, where they will receive their next mission. As dawn breaks, the early sunlight disperses the lingering cold on the ground. When they calm down, both girls realize a horrifying truth. If a part of the body is eaten by a monster, even when resurrected, those parts cannot be restored to their original state. This condition puts the group in a passive position, forcing them to seek support from the villagers by approaching the leader of the area, the only one who can assign the next mission. Although not fully recovered, they still try to reach the village surrounded by gloomy mountains and dense forests. The residents there, who have been waiting for the appearance of summoned warriors, quickly recognize the three as heroes. However, what awaits them afterward quickly turns the atmosphere of hope into heaviness. When they meet the village chief, that old man assigns the group their next to eliminate the very monster that had nearly killed Yusuke the day before. A bloodthirsty creature with strength far beyond the capabilities of those who have just stepped into this world. Faced with this requirement, all three cannot hide their confusion. The current situation is too dangerous. Resources are nearly depleted and every decision must be extremely careful. Nevertheless, despite facing danger, Yusuke feels excited about his personal journey. As long as Shindo and Hakozaki don't fall simultaneously, the resurrection system will still maintain the team's formation. That night, Yusuke again enters the forest hunting monsters alone. In his mind, grinding levels is no longer simply about survival, but also the only way to make himself useful, worthy of the role this world has entrusted to him. By chance, while searching for training targets, Yusuke sees a dim circle of light appear in a clearing. This is a kind of virtual memory of a conversation between Shindo and Hakozaki. In that conversation, Shindo asks Hakozaki about the next member this system will summon in the upcoming mission. She expresses interest if a boy appears, even having hope that she would be accompanied by a national judo champion. However, what Shindo really wants to know is not about combat skills, but Hakozaki's personal feelings. Whom does she care for? Whom does she trust? Instead of answering directly, Hakozaki evades the question, mentioning her view of boys, most of whom are rude, vulgar, and act insensitively. She has never placed her trust in them. Shindo seems to agree with this thought, making Yusuke feel pity for himself, saying that if they had interacted with him before, they surely would have had a different perspective. As the atmosphere of the memory segment gradually eases, Shindo suddenly reveals that the person she hopes will be summoned next is Yusuke. However, this important information is missed because Yusuke in the present is distracted, busy thinking about who might be the next one to join the team. When returning to the village, the peaceful scenery unexpectedly reminds him of his childhood hometown in the peaceful countryside where he once had a close friend. Life changed when Yusuke moved to Tokyo, where he always felt the strangeness in people's eyes. Both teachers and friends seemed distant with silent contempt. Under pressure from the past, Yusuke puts even more effort into training, even though he has to fight fierce monsters alone. He still hopes that by reaching level 10, his strength will be enough to face the upcoming challenge. However, that effort is quickly interrupted by surprising news. The system suddenly announces that Hakozaki has died in battle. Panic spreads throughout his mind. Despite being deep in the forest, Yusuke immediately turns around and rushes back to the village as fast as possible. Upon arrival, he no longer recognizes the familiar space. Smoke rises thickly from burning houses. The sound of people screaming in terror echoes from everywhere. The monster that had merely killed him before has returned, this time directly attacking their final hiding place. Amidst the village covered in flames, Yusuke sees another memory circle glowing in a small corner of a collapsed house. When he touches it, he sees images of Hakozaki diligently practicing sword fighting every day, despite her real-world body being very weak, always needing medicine to sustain life. But inside the other world, she becomes a strong person, working hard not to be a burden to her teammates. This moment weighs heavily on Yusuke. His previous selfish thoughts of living for himself and playing for the thrills swept away by a fierce wave of emotion. With no other choice, he decides to face the creature alone. Without hesitation, Yusuke rushes toward the monster, attacking to block its advance and create an opportunity for others to escape. However, the power difference is too obvious. Just one blow from the beast sends his body flying far, landing in the cold river nearby. In this strange world, one of the most vital rules that players must remember is the law of resurrection. If a team member dies, he will be revived after a period of 30 seconds. However, this is not as simple as it appears. Once that person is reborn in a dangerous situation, for instance, within the killing range of a monster and unable to escape the peril, they can immediately die again. In such a case, the resurrection process will be temporarily frozen until at least one person in the group survives long enough to activate the rebirth system. Having fallen into this situation, both Shindo and Hakozaki are trapped inside the giant monster's stomach. Being still inside its body when resurrected, they immediately lose their lives again before they can react. The system thus stops counting down. The resurrection is paused, making the situation extremely critical. Meanwhile, Yusuke, the only one who still maintains his life, constantly moves around the battle area. He runs while observing each jump of the giant monster chasing behind. With keen observation, Yusuke realizes that this creature doesn't charge in a straight line like normal monsters, but uses jumps like a frog. If he predicts where it will land after each jump, he can slip out of the danger zone. Nevertheless, the strategy of constant evasion is not a long-term solution. Yusuke's body grows tired. In a moment when he seems unable to continue, the creature suddenly closes in, delivering an extremely powerful bite that nearly grabs his head at that life and death moment. From behind appears the silhouette of a blue creature, the monster Yusuke had spared when leveling up earlier. Without hesitation, he draws his last usable weapon, attacking as quick as possible, just enough to defeat the target, a result that doesn't disappoint. After the killing blow, the system announces that Yusuke has reached level 10. and simultaneously, the fate wheel function is reactivated, giving the player a unique opportunity to change destiny. When the wheel stops, the displayed result both surprises and amazes him, and the next class he acquires is Chef. Although somewhat unfortunate compared to Warrior or Mage, the special skill of the Chef class is very useful in the current situation. It allows Yusuke to see the internal organs and structure inside creatures' bodies, a great advantage for finding ways to rescue his companions. Now, thanks to his new ability, he discovers the exact location where Shindo and Hakozaki are imprisoned in the monster's stomach. Not missing the opportunity, Yusuke immediately approaches the monster, using his sharp blade to tear a long path through the belly, while opening the thick layer of meat covering the internal organs. As soon as he cut the creature, his two friends came out. They are officially resurrected once again. Returning to the battle line, the scene moves all three deeply. Though no one says a word, their eyes say it all. Spiritually reinforced, Yusuke and the two girls immediately coordinate to create a pincer attack. The monster can no longer jump due to its unhealed wound, significantly reducing its movement speed. Despite possessing only basic combat skills, both Shindo and Hakozaki still try their best to coordinate with their teammate. However, facing the overwhelming power of the giant monster, both are quickly defeated and forced to return to the resurrection cycle. Meanwhile, Yusuke, the only one who still maintains the ability to move, has found a weak point on its body, a small wound that hasn't yet healed. Not missing the opportunity, he rushes straight to act the creature, stabbing it directly, causing it to lose its ability to resist. The price for this reckless action is immediate death. Nevertheless, the monster is still controlled. Immediately after resurrection, Shindo, the smartest member of the group, continues the final plan by using a special staff to pierce the monster's skull. And after that, its head started to explode. The battle ends, the mission is completed, and the player group returns to normal status one by one. The final result shows that the person who leveled up the most is Yusuke, who originally had the farmer class. Not strong at first, but had many opportunities to accumulate experience. In contrast, Shindo, the only mage, contributed almost nothing. When standing before the game master to receive rewards after the mission, Yusuke asks the important question of what awaits them at the end of the mission path. The answer is unclear. However, a future memory segment appears. A city plunged into ruin, humans invaded by monsters from above, with no hope remaining. This image imprints deeply in each person's mind, creating a sense of extreme unease. After the sequence of images ends, the group is sent back to the real world. Although time in the game seems to have stretched at the place they left, the clock still points to the exact initial moment. Nothing has changed in terms of time, but the emotions at each person's heart have completely changed. Shindo quickly leaves, returning to her work, sending a fist bump as a sincere thank you to Yusuke. The next day, a strange bell rang, suddenly appeared through a direct call. Although the voice was slightly different from previous times, Yusuke quickly recognized this as a summons for a new mission. For reasons unknown, the system took him straight to a strange school, even pushing him into the women's bathroom. There, a group of female students were preparing to bully another girl by taking pictures of her and publishing it online. Although he didn't know any of them, Yusuke couldn't stand still. By instinct, he rushed in to rescue the girl with glasses, destroying all phones within reach. Unrelated to the situation, this bold action caused the entire group of girls to run away. Yusuke was misunderstood as a weirdo. The only one who stayed was Yuka, the girl who had been bullied earlier. After hearing her explanation that she was punished for an accidental comment during a livestream, Yusuke understood her situation better. Although a year older than him, Shindo seemed quite childish, dreamy, and somewhat peculiar. She thought Yusuke was trying to act cool. A few days later, the group of three was summoned into the mission world again. Surprisingly, there was a fourth member to appear, and it was none other than Yuka, who now became an official member of team. The game master, appearing again with a sudden greeting, introduced the profession assigned by the system to Yuka, a fire mage. In this update, there was an important change directly affecting combat. The resurrection time was no longer fixed at 30 seconds as before. Due to the excessive use of resurrection in the previous mission, the system had extended the interval to 40 seconds. The fourth summons opened up a mission that seems simple at first glance: complete the exploration of 5% of the map area and transport an unknown type of goods to a strange destination named Redubu. However, all information related to the package remained completely mysterious, leaving the group fumbling in the dark. Before they could implement a plan, Yuka, the newest member of the team, was briefed by Shindo and Hakozaki on the entire story related to Yusuke's bold action in the real world. A strange incident in the school bathroom had distorted his image in the eyes of his friends, leading to complete isolation and an unfamiliar collective. Yusuke became a quiet shadow that no one understood the reason for, except for those who had gone through life and death battles with him in the virtual world. When the team decided to split forces to speed up the map exploration progress, an unexpected situation occurred. A large creature lunged straight from the sky to the ground. From its carcass emerged a centipede with a bizarre shape. Before he could react, Yusuke was knocked away and lost his life immediately. Using resurrection was no longer easy when the time was extended to 40 seconds, forcing the group to struggle without their main hero. Meanwhile, Yuka still couldn't get used to the pace of battle, trying to exercise the skills of fire manipulation. However, her inexperience meant many of the spells she cast had almost no effect. They could only slightly increase the temperature in a very small area around her, which wasn't very useful. In the intense battle, she cast spells with great spirit, but the results were extremely insignificant. Another monster suddenly emerged from underground, marching straight into Yuka, causing her to fall unconscious. In the midst of chaos, Yusuke, after coming back to life, began to recall what the girl had said the day before. Although she often seemed somewhat childish, she made a special impression on him, enough to make Yusuke want to change into a better person. Since becoming a player in this world, he had always wanted to seek something beyond survival, which now perhaps meant being cool and becoming someone who could be respected. He spent the previous 2 weeks researching how to make himself cooler. At the crucial moment, Yusuke noticed the weakness on the creature's body was in the abdomen, a place hidden from view and less protected. Yusuke used a kitchen knife, the familiar weapon of his current chef profession, to eliminate the monster's legs one by one, making it immobile. Then he took Hakozaki's hand to prepare to finish off the monster. Together, they focused their strength to cut off the head of the giant creature with a decisive slash. The mission to eliminate the centipede was completed, a neat ending to a battle that seemed to have no escape. After things quieted down, the story of Shindo, the third player, gradually unfolded through flashbacks. As a child, she was stubborn, always causing trouble, and never willing to yield. That personality was largely formed due to the influence of her 2 older brothers in the family, who often pressured and challenged her, causing her to rebel with violence. During school, Shindo often inflicted injuries on herself and also had many fights with classmates, causing her to become gradually isolated, having to eat lunch alone in the hallway. This situation continued until she happened to meet an older sister, the only one at that time who would listen and share, giving her a sense of security. However, life continued to deal painful blows. Yuri, who had an unattractive appearance, had become the target of ridicule on social media. The harsh words poured down make her fall into despair and finally choose to leave this world. That shock hit Shindo directly, causing her to quietly disappear from school, turning her back on everyone around her. The pain of losing a loved one not only hurt her, but also clearly illuminated the intense desire hidden deep in her mind. Deep down, she believed that she must become brilliant and strong enough to make everyone look back and acknowledge her existence. For Shindo, this new world was the only opportunity to be reborn, where she didn't have to bow her head before any contemptuous glances. The next morning, the group of heroes decided to return to the village they had visited, hoping to find transportation to continue their journey. However, when they set foot there, they realized the scenery had completely changed. The people had disappeared without a trace, leaving only cold houses and an atmosphere full of desolation. An empty barrel rolled by in the wind, containing a blurry map and some rough directions. According to it, the destination they needed to reach was located on the other side of the continent. If traveling by horse, the journey would take about 1 month. On foot, the time would be tripled. With no other choice, the group was forced to find a faster way to move. They learned that near this area, a major competition was taking place, with a prize for being special support technology, an opportunity to shorten the journey to Renanda. This information made Yusuke determined to participate. On the way to the competition venue, they accidentally fell into an ambush set by a local gang of robbers. According to the rules in this world, heroes were not allowed to injure humans. Unable to fight back, Yusuke suffered a serious deduction in experience, leading to a drop in level. In panic, the group was forced to retreat. Shindo quickly set up a dust screen, creating a barrier that obscured vision, providing conditions for the remaining members to escape. This brave action caused her to be captured by the robbers. Before entering the competition, Yusuke took advantage of all the time to grind levels by killing small goblins. Thanks to persistent training, he reached the threshold required to spin for a new profession. The result this time surprised everyone. Yusuke received the role of a creature mage, a rare profession with special powers that could manipulate the metabolic rate of any creature. In addition, this ability also affected the persuasiveness of the owner when communicating. Although at first it didn't seem practical at all, since setting foot in the virtual world, no ability had ever really stood out. So this time, Yusuke felt somewhat consoled. A big event was waiting ahead. At least now, he wasn't a complete burden. However, as soon as the qualifying round in the competition began, Yusuke was quickly eliminated from the match. Thanks to the resurrection ability, his body quickly recovered. He continued to observe the following developments with a new mindset. His boldness and behavior attracted the attention of a female knight, Kavo, a key member of the local military force. Noticing that this young hero seemed to be fighting not just for reward points, she proposed a deal. Yusuke would provide all information about the hideout, operation plans, and battle strength of the gang they had encountered earlier. In exchange, Kavo would lend him a horse, the necessary means to shorten the journey to Renanda. In addition to exchanging information, the female knight decided to provide basic training in sword techniques for Yusuke, who was still too weak compared to the general standard. With serious training in that short time, Yusuke more or less began to feel the warrior spirit forming within himself. Not long after the plan to raid the robbers' camp was deployed, and military forces quickly attacked the target according to the instructions Yusuke provided. Despite his training, Yusuke still could defeat many enemies by himself. However, this situation was different because this was illegal defense territory, so orthodox warriors were penalized in experience when fighting back. Unable to resist the overwhelming force from the army, the robbers decided to summon a terrible entity called Black Sacker, a form of creature once considered human. However, due to eating spiritual beings containing magical power beyond its capacity, it had completely lost its reason, becoming a killing machine that no longer distinguished between friend and foe. However, instead of choosing a simple life with a small home, that creature plunged into the battlefield with pure violent fury, enjoying the feeling of torturing others. Each blow was an expression of anger on everything around. Faced with an enemy far beyond normal fighting ability, Kavo gradually lost strength. Her sharp sword was forced back and the creature was about to end her. Only Yusuke rushed forward to support her. Amidst the panic, Yusuke suddenly remembered his new skill, the distinctive power of a creature mage. After a moment of analysis, he applied a tactic to distract the enemy. Taking advantage of when the opponent was off guard, he rushed forward, delivering a fatal stab through the bloodthirsty creature's stomach. Although it held on for a few seconds, the opponent was finally defeated by a decisive slash from Kavo, who ultimately reclaimed her sword to end that battle. After the incident, Yusuke's group was protected by Kavo. In response to their courage, she agreed to escort the entire party to Renanda. In return, the female knight requested to bring along a few close associates to ensure safety throughout the long journey. At the same time, throughout the journey, she would directly provide additional sword training for each member, helping them enhance their strength to face unpredictable dangers. Waiting ahead since childhood, Hakozaki has always lived with a weak, chronically ill body. Therefore, her greatest desire was to become a talented pharmacist. She wanted to be able to formulate special medicines to treat not only herself, but also her mother, who had supported her through many difficult years. However, when pulled into this game world where the strong can punish the weak in the blink of an eye, Hakozaki couldn't help but feel dizzy witnessing the army eliminate robbers with just a few bloody sword strikes. The fragile heart within her seemed to constrict with fear. Although deep down, Hakozaki very much wanted to protect her friends and innocent people living in this fantastical world, she still couldn't shake off her hesitation and held back by the fear of death every time she had to face a real battle. Meanwhile, Yusuke, who had gone through various professions since the game began, currently possessed quite a few unique skills, from cooking, healing, to the abilities of a creature mage. Thanks to his ability to adjust metabolic rates, he could use it to stimulate the recovery process on injured bodies, making cuts heal quickly. He could even save dying people if the skill was used in time. On the challenging journey, the group members gradually had to face countless injuries, both physical and mental. It was during these times that Yusuke's support skills proved extremely useful. Anyone injured would come to him as a place to entrust their survival faith. As for Hakozaki, she continuously observed, learned, and silently reminded herself that although currently weak, she would definitely not stop. She wanted to stand up and become someone who'd help others, not just hide behind stronger people. In another corner, Kavo was training the members with high intensity, forcing them to practice sword fighting until exhaustion. In a deserted area deep in the forest where creatures gathered, Hakozaki finally experienced the first moment when she truly dared to face her own fear. In what seemed like a random situation, the sword in her hand was raised at the exact moment a deformed monster lunged down from a tree. The blade stopped the attack just before its claws could touch her, and at that moment, survival instinct combined with the deep fear in her heart forced her to act, and surprisingly, she didn't collapse. Meanwhile, Yusuke, who was taking on the role of a mage, displayed a rather strange obsession with living creatures. He seemed to take an unusual pleasure in observing the operating mechanisms of their bodies, to the point of frequently testing his ability to control metabolism by weakening and then finishing them off slowly. His group often teased this hobby, but for him, all actions served the purpose of survival and finding opportunities to survive in a world full of dangers. While moving along the road to the trade fair, they accidentally encountered a group of soldiers surrounded by a pack of wolves with very aggressive hunting behavior. Preliminary information showed that among those trapped were children whose lives were threatened. Hakozaki, although still carrying the fear of fighting in her heart, expressed a desire to approach and rescue them herself. Yusuke immediately split off with Hakozaki, deciding to leave the group to go to the scene. Both assessed that this could very well be a hidden mission containing clues about the goods that needed to be transported to Redobo, the target location for this challenge. Meanwhile, the remaining members continued forward to complete the main objective. Along with that choice, Yusuke and Hakozaki were frankly confronted by the wolves that had been attracted by the aura of those with powers. Pulled by the sense of hostility, the pack switched to attacking their group. Although Yusuke only had a kitchen knife and a pan in hand, and Hakozaki only possessed a thin sword, both still struggled to fight back in vain. The power difference between the two sides was too great. They were quickly knocked down and fell into a resurrection state where they no longer wanted to rely on themselves, causing others to have to stand up and protect them. Hakozaki, after being resurrected, chose to face directly the fear gnawing at her heart. This time, she no longer hid or stood behind others. She actively moved forward, facing one of the fierce wolves that was lurking. Although her heart was still trembling, each step carried a more determined resolve than ever before. Not hesitating to draw her sword from the beginning, she used calmness and a composed attitude to make the monster mistake her for prey. Unable to resist when it lunged forward, quick as lightning, the sword was decisively drawn from its sheath. She didn't need to use brute force, simply placing the blade into the trajectory of the pounce. The steel blade stabbed straight into its chest, finishing it in an instant. In another corner of the battlefield, Yusuke, after realizing that someone familiar was approaching, decided to take advantage of the opportunity, luring the remaining wolf toward the new ally. Kavo appeared with an experienced demeanor. Without needing much exchange, she immediately delivered a sharp slash, taking down the target as soon as it came within sword range. Kavo's appearance was not random. She was currently working with a group of soldiers from the Gibbon Empire. These were not just ordinary warriors. They carried a secret mission, including escorting a group of priests to the land of Euro. However, in reality, this was not a normal journey, but rather a one-way trip. Under the strict dictatorship of Gibbon, all forms of religion were banned as they would threaten state control. Religious followers, once discovered, would often be forced to leave the country or even be pressured to seek death under the guise of voluntariness to maintain stability within the nation. In a small kingdom where chess was regarded as a symbol of strategy and power, the situation was falling into chaos. One of the soldiers under this country's army, Sergeant Gento, didn't actually exist, but was just a fabricated image created to distract the public. He was simply a tool assembled to reinforce false beliefs to manipulate the thoughts of the masses. The local residents were the suspects of being dangerous elements, as they might be targets that the ruling force was quietly monitoring due to suspicion. Yusuke's group had to approach and observe carefully to understand the situation and gather information. Through the account of a member of the society, Yusuke's group learned about a child in danger needing help to escape. In the past, the kingdom had many groups who worshipped kings or sacred creatures like demigods. Ideological conflicts led to fierce wars between beliefs. By the fifth king's reign, to restore order, he decided to erase all traces of religion in the territory. Anyone expressing reverence for any supernatural power was dealt with. The monarch also invaded neighboring countries, enslaving their people and bringing them back to serve the poor class in his own kingdom. This information was not only confirmed by Yusuke's group, but also verified by a soldier in the king's army. Nevertheless, in Yuka's mind, a member of the group using power to impose personal notions was unacceptable. When hearing the story, Yuka, who always maintained her position, often went to the inn to monitor. Meanwhile, Professor Kaabel had to intervene to prevent impulsive actions from teammates. The group currently had only 12 days left before completing the mission. In this world, the group's time was only 13 days and 20 hours. The time frame didn't allow for any mistakes. During the rug discussion, one of the native mages suggested that if they continued along the roundabout path through the plains, they wouldn't make it in time. Therefore, the only choice to shorten the journey was to cross through the large mountain ahead. However, that area contained complex ancient mechanism systems designed as protective traps. At the entrance to the mountain, the group discovered a giant water wheel attached to the door leading to the tunnel inside. When using the device to open the way, all exits behind were also locked tight, causing them to be completely isolated deep within the mountain. The mage refused to continue accompanying them, feeling he couldn't cooperate with people who didn't respect caution in each step. Left with 4 people, Yusuke, Shindo, Hakozaki, and Yuka, they had no choice but to move forward despite the dangers waiting inside. Along the dark corridors, many cleverly disguised mechanisms made it difficult for ordinary people to recognize. However, with experience from previous missions, the group could judge the path and coordinate to overcome a series of traps. When they reached a large space, almost like a natural hall, suddenly, one of them, a local elder who had been supporting them, was separated from the group. As the stone floor suddenly collapsed, the wall behind rose up, pushing him to fall into the deep abyss below, leaving no chance of escape due to the extreme height. Although the loss was inevitable, the 3 remaining players continued the journey with intense focus. Then they had to calculate every minute and second, analyzing the movements of the stone mechanisms to pass through a narrow gap where 2 walls continuously opened and closed in cycles. Passing that challenge, the group reached an area resembling an ancient arena. The atmosphere there was thick and heavy, with something unusual waiting. Just as warned by a soldier they had encountered earlier, the creature residing in this area was not a common species. It had a human-like shape, but was preserved in a mummified state. This was Nipan, an artificial entity created through ancient magic. Because its nature no longer belonged to the living world, it could exist for decades without maintaining life like ordinary creatures. The confrontation was about to take place, and every action now was vital. From the area near the fortress gate of the Empire's army, Yusuke's group had to perform dangerous maneuvers to overcome treacherous terrain. Yusuke used a kitchen knife as a temporary tool, sticking it into wall corners to create footholds for climbing the steep rock face. However, the great height and slipperiness made Yusuke constantly slip, falling many times and having to struggle to climb up again from the beginning. Despite much effort, they still couldn't access the important area. Amidst the chaos, the light from behind suddenly went out, pushing everyone into a pitch-black space. No one could see the path clearly anymore. This forced them to rely on intuition to continue moving after a period of intense focus. Finally, Yusuke managed to overcome that difficult road. At the highest position, a large circle, symbolizing the transfer ritual, appeared under dim light. Upon careful observation, Yusuke recognized a familiar person lying motionless on the ground. It was Cavadel's older brother, also one of the few people who had first fought alongside the group. During many early days of the journey, he had many times helped protect the entire team in the most dangerous battles. However, this time, no miracle occurred. The traces of attack on the old comrade's body showed he was killed by 3 high-ranking warriors from the Empire. Bloodthirsty individuals who viewed lives as a power game. Due to the severe injuries, Yusuke could not perform healing skills, nor was there time to say goodbye. With a heavy heart, he could only suppress his emotions and continue toward where his group was waiting at a desolate battlefield at the end of the road. Shindo, the girl who once carried a gentle appearance, but had a strong inner self, stood amid the ruins. Unlike Nippon, the artificial creature the group had just confronted, this time the person standing before them was one of the players who had previously failed earlier. Despite being defeated due to the effects of magical stat imbalance, a consequence of synchronization between the virtual world and the real body, that girl had not abandoned her ideals. Afterward, Kaho and Shindo moved forward to fight the Nippani monster. They only needed to defeat it for the whole group to escape this hellish place. However, in an unexpected moment, Kavo was stabbed in the stomach by the monster. The attack caused her body to lose balance and fall into the deep lake below. The freezing water continuously swept around her, but Kavo still tried to stay alert to avoid losing control. Shindo, in a panic, closed her eyes and stepped back without paying attention to the terrain, accidentally stepping on a dying fish, causing it to suffocate immediately. However, luck smiled upon her. When a strange energy from the game system was activated, she unexpectedly leveled up, causing the entire timeline in the mission world to freeze. Shindo remembered that Yusuke had already told about this phenomenon. It happens when reaching level 10. The system would add a new profession for the character. Afterward, she received the duelist profession, similar to her friend Hakozaki. And when time began to move again, the game master immediately rotated to the next challenge. The next battle was considered a life and death confrontation with a giant warrior carrying a longsword. The layer of skin covering his body was as hard as stone, making normal attacks unable to cut him. She launched a direct attack, stabbing straight into the opponent's chest. However, because the skin was too hard, the blade didn't have enough force to cut him. Instead of panicking, the girl immediately changed her attack position. A moment later, the opponent's sword hit, causing her to lose an arm. Nevertheless, Shindo maintained her spirit, raising her shield to block the monster's next blow. Then she jumped up from behind, grabbing the enemy's arm as it swung upward. After that, she stabbed the sword from behind the skull, straight through the enemy's heart, using exactly the technique that Kavo had taught, focusing on the weak point to break natural defense capabilities. When Yusuke arrived, the entire battle had already ended. Upon hearing that Kavo was in danger in the deep lake, Yusuke didn't hesitate even for a second. Immediately, he plunged into the water to save her. Under the freezing water, he dove deep down, pulling the unconscious Kavo to shore with all his remaining strength. Although the wounds on the girl's body gradually stabilized thanks to the special healing ability, her physical condition was still extremely weak. To support the recovery process, Yusuke had to continuously use the skill of absorbing magical power from the surrounding monsters. This helped him maintain healing abilities for a long time, but also caused himself to fall into a state of exhaustion. Each time he healed someone, his own life was being partially drained. The sensation of dizziness spread throughout his body, making his limbs feel numb. Seeing Yusuke struggle so much for her sake, Keivo appreciates his efforts by thanking him. The evening passed in silence with only the sound of wind gently blowing through the pine trees. During contemplation, Yusuke began to connect what he had experienced in previous missions. Suddenly, he realized something strange that had been there all along. None of the missions they had ever received explicitly mentioned a specific name. Whether investigating the village chief, discovering two mysterious villages, or searching for a monster in the library, or all only gave suggestions without clearly identifying individual targets. This thought led Yusuke to a bold hypothesis. The item considered as goods in this mission didn't necessarily have to be a tangible object. Special prisoners or specific individuals all had the potential to become goods if properly defined. However, according to his intuition, he believed that the child they had rescued in the previous encounter, although being a pursued target, was certainly not the item that the game master desired. And perhaps what the system required this time wasn't about the form or external value, but rather how players perceive responsibility when making choices in this harsh world. While recalling the previous chain of challenges, he suddenly realized the key point that the entire group had nestled. The previous mission had required them to meet the village chief to receive a request for help. However, the system had never clearly specified which village to go to or which particular village chief to contact. This meant that as long as they found any village with a chief, even in a strange place, and accepted any job, it would be counted as completing the mission as required. When hearing Yusuke's explanation, Yuka and Kusue began to reconsider the entire journey. No guideline mentioned the name of the goods or clear information about the specific destination. Both awakened to the realization that the system actually allowed flexibility in the method of implementation as long as it met the general conditions that the mission required. Thanks to this, Yoshu quickly concluded that the three believers were not really the goods that needed to be transported. As everyone had thought, this mission didn't need to depend on them. Any item, subject, or goods, if brought to the appropriate delivery point, would still be recognized as completed. Finally, Yusuke's group also realized that everything they had done in this fourth mission seemed to bring no practical results. Nevertheless, Kusue couldn't accept abandoning the three believers who were being held captive. Faced with her determination, Yusuke quickly decided that the group would try to simultaneously accomplish two objectives, both supporting the rescue of the victims and completing the delivery mission to Redobo with any item. The next morning, the group was divided into two directions. One side took responsibility for finding suitable goods to bring to the necessary location, while the remaining group would pursue the kingdom's soldiers who were holding the three captured believers. However, the situation at this point was extremely sensitive. The country of Dias was known for being bellicose, so any wrong move could become a spark leading to full-scale war between the two countries. Therefore, Kava was forced to act with the utmost caution. If she causes even a small loss, the consequences would be irreparable. Meanwhile, Yusuke came up with a cunning plan to force the opponent to yield without needing violence. This scheme was so bold that both Kavo and Yuka couldn't hide their surprise when they heard him present it. That evening, Yusuke approached three escorting soldiers camped nearby. He introduced himself as someone coming to negotiate, then constructed a convincing story about escaping from the dungeon. The three believers had sacrificed themselves. His two companions had fallen into an abyss and couldn't return, and now only Yuka survived. Thus, Yusuke wanted to exchange the lives of those who had fallen to get back the three remaining believers. The plan didn't stop there. Yusuke issued a cold warning that if not accommodated, he as an immortal hero would spread the doctrine of the three martyrs throughout the world, causing the lands to fall under a new belief. In this world where faith carried power, having an immortal warrior spreading religion would create a real danger. Unable to be killed, unable to be stopped, Yusuke was like a prophecy overturning the current order. Fearful of this prospect, the three arresting soldiers began to waver. Recognizing the opportunity, Yuka pretended to be opposed to Yusuke, creating discord to deceive the opponent. She mentioned that she and Yusuke had long disagreed since she was ready to cooperate against him. Initially, the soldier group was still cautious and didn't rush to believe. However, if they didn't collaborate, the entire plan would fall apart, so they had to accept the proposal. Eventually, two soldiers left to pursue Yusuke. Meanwhile, one person remained to monitor the three believers for 3 hours. Unexpectedly, one of them attacked Yuka with a fatal stat. When discovering that the entire previous story was just a scam with no other choice, Yuka was immediately subdued and escorted as a real prisoner. However, this was actually just part of the arranged plan aimed at creating the necessary time for Yusuke to execute the final stage of the play he had laboriously prepared. Yusuke returned to the Daio's soldiers' gathering place. Upon arrival, he calmly declared that he himself had ended the three believers, a form of revenge for previous events, for the reason that the person originally couldn't survive until execution. His action completely ruined the entire plan of the soldier group, because according to the mission rules, if the goods didn't arrive at the necessary place in a certain condition, the entire mission would fail. While the enemy side was still trying to process this, Yuka, who seemed to be tightly captured, suddenly escaped. With remarkable ease, she quickly took a horse and retreated safely. All the details were within Yusuke's careful calculation. By creating the misunderstanding that he was the only villain, he had not only helped the three believers return safely, but also took all the blame himself, preventing the two countries from falling into the spiral of war. On the soldiers' side, when they realized they had been spectacularly deceived and couldn't complete the mission as expected, all three immediately turned back to pursue Yusuke and his associates. Their hearts rose with feelings of regret mixed with anger for letting the opportunity slip away. On the contrary, Yuka felt admiration for Yusuke's bold and intelligent calculation, to the point of being scary. She couldn't hide the chilling sensation when looking into his eyes. Someone who could stage an entire play to save people even at the cost of sacrificing himself. Meanwhile, at another distant place, Shindo's group with Kusue continued their arduous journey. 3 days had passed, and they still couldn't find any village to complete the remaining part of the mission. The time for the entire team was gradually running out, with just over 4 days and a few hours left to salvage the situation. As for the three believers, they continuously expressed deep gratitude to Yuka and Yusuke. Yuka once again emphasized to Yusuke that although this was just a simulated world, killing should be minimized. However, for Yusuke, those human emotions no longer seemed too important. A companion had previously guided the hands of the Daio's soldiers, leaving no mercy in his heart. As a consequence of the battle, Yusuke lost 2 levels for killing a soldier in a non-mandatory situation. However, compared to saving the lives of 3 believers and avoiding war between 2 countries, that price was completely worth it. In another direction, Canla, the loyal general under the kingdom, along with her last teammate, finally traced the whereabouts of the carriage they had been frantically searching for. Without wasting time, they quickly sent an urgent letter to the royal palace to report the current situation. Everything was within the planned strategy. Meanwhile, Yusuke just timely arranged to withdraw from the area right after identifying the danger. Almost immediately, Kavo suddenly appeared. But one previously considered dead now stood imposingly before the old enemy. Her appearance astonished Kavo. He couldn't believe that Kavo was still alive after everything that had happened. Not wasting more time, the Cold Swords woman invited Kabel to a duel. Without many fancy tricks, Kavo used just one move to end the enemy's life. The precise sword stroke was so accurate that his arm was severed in the blink of an eye. After declaring that everything that had just happened was merely a clever play staged to deceive the opponent, Kavo ended the battle by taking his life. Meanwhile, the messenger bird carrying news of Cable's force's failure had timely flown back to the royal palace. When reading the report's content, Cavalry the King was furious. Immediately, he secretly assigned a task to a trusted courtier, requiring this person to hunt down and punish the hero group that had turned the plant into smoke. In another development, Hakozaki's group had reached a small village near the Radobo border. However, the hope of finding a delivery person or goods that needed to be transported to Radobo quickly vanished. When they discovered that no one in that village had any need to ship or trade anything with that land, disappointment arose. Many making the journey that seemed almost complete now fall into an unpredictable state of stagnation. At another location, Yusuke's group was also in the process of preparing to depart for the next area to continue completing the assigned mission. During this time, Yuka noticed that Kavo seemed to be developing special feelings for Yusuke, though trying to keep it secret. The quiet expression in Kavo's eyes made Yuka recognize this feeling somewhat disappointed as the journey was coming to an end. At the same time, seeing that Kavo was still hesitant to express her feelings, Yuka decided to quietly help. She created conditions for the two to be together more by suggesting they should train together to improve combat skills. However, despite the opportunities that Yuka tried to create, there was still no significant emotional development between Yusuke and Kavo. The matchmaking plan that seemed clever led to an opposite result. Kavo made Yuka train with her with the reason of training both spirit and physical strength before new challenges, and in another direction, unable to find any type of goods that needed to be transported to the Radobo region. Hakozaki began to think differently. She said they would proactively intercept the routes leading to Radobo, hoping to meet a suitable cargo caravan. Indeed, this tactic brought unexpected results. They quickly encountered a caravan on the way to the destination. However, the cart driver didn't show cooperation. They refused to let Kusue's group participate, making the situation tense. Conflict was inevitable. The skirmish took place briefly, but thanks to close coordination and the superior abilities of Shindo, they quickly gained the upper hand. The enemy was defeated. Victory belonged to the hero group. At the same time, they also won the right to use that cart to continue completing the final objective in this mission. When night fell, the hero group temporarily stopped to rest. After a busy day trying to connect the feelings between Kavo and Yusuke, Yuka had spent considerable effort throughout the day devising various plans to bring the two closer together. However, all of her efforts still didn't bring any clear effect. Feeling somewhat disappointed and tired, Yuka decided to go to bed early, leaving space for them to talk in private. In the quiet darkness of the late night, Kavo unexpectedly approached Yusuke, who, her eyes tranquil mixed with deep emotions, difficult to express in words. Yusuke seemed to notice the change in her attitude. Surprisingly, the only thing that Kavo expressed was a sincere thank you to him, because without him she wouldn't have been able to fulfill her wish to avenge the fallen comrade. There was no confession made. The next morning, not letting time pass uselessly, the group quickly packed their things and continued the journey toward the Radobo region, which played an important role in the final part of the mission. Thanks to relentless efforts over many days, the hero group had collected 3 types of goods, especially the first items that qualified to complete the requirements they were assigned. Not simply transporting goods, it actually included 3 key objectives. First, the hero group had to ensure absolute safety for the 3 believers on their evacuation journey because they had important roles in the religious organization that still existed in this world. Next, the weapons collected after the close combat with a group of soldiers from the Cambodia side needed to be brought to Radobo City to be handed over to merchants specializing in trading combat equipment. This not only helped them complete the delivery part, but also created stronger links between local forces and people from another world. Finally, a rather odd mission that made everyone feel unpleasant. Transferring 3 boxes containing the heads of fallen soldiers, considered as evidence of mission completion or a form of brutal propaganda between forces. Shortly after, they receive an additional side mission. Although not too complex, but requiring urgency specifically, only 5% of the mission world's map remained unexplored. The group was split to quickly complete the remaining portion before the time limit of this challenge came to an end. After completing most of the mission, the hero group decided to divide into 4 directions to speed up the map exploration, progress, and aiming for the remaining 5% of unidentified territory. The previous evening, right at the crossroads of the Snow Mountain, Yusuke and Kavo parted ways. Although once moved by fleeting emotions, both understood that the most necessary thing now was to continue walking for the mission. Waiting ahead, the cold tightened its grip on the world around them. Snowflakes that initially fell sparsely had now formed a thick white curtain, making visibility blurry. That harshness made Kavo think about the worst possibility. If someone in the group became exhausted and collapsed in this desolate mountain area, their body would likely be completely frozen when the temperature dropped to an unrecoverable level. Even if the resurrection cycle was activated, nothing could be salvaged anymore. Rebirth would immediately lead to death because the environment was too cruel. Although each person faced their own journey in their hearts, they still preserved memories of each other. Moments fighting together, sharing meals, relying on each other amid dangers that was like a smoldering flame keeping their spirits from being extinguished in the fierce white storms surging around them. No one knew in advance whether they would survive or not, but all were united in moving forward, clinging to the hope that if they tried, they would complete the goal. Waiting at the end of the map, the snow continued to fall, thicker than they had imagined. The remaining distance seemed not to shorten at all. In fact, it felt increasingly endless. The snowstorm continued to expand its sphere of influence with bursts of freezing wind cutting down incessantly, covering the path with a layer of ice so thick that directions were no longer recognizable. The harsh cold clung to every coat. Fingers become numb, and even breath freezes in midair. Finally, among them, the first person who couldn't withstand these harsh conditions was Kusue. Although she always carried a persistent will, always trying not to give up, this time her fragile body couldn't defeat the cruel nature. She collapsed in silence amid the endless stretching whiteness like a small leaf buried in a violent snowstorm. Kusue's passing made both Shindo and Yuka heavy-hearted. They had never thought that this journey could separate people from each other so hopelessly. However, time didn't allow them to stand still. The storm grew increasingly fierce, hindering even the most basic movements, making their legs unable to lift. Eventually, when their bodies couldn't move even one more step, these 2 people also stopped motionless in the storm, like 2 giant ice statues, leaving only one person who still maintained the ability to continue the journey. Yusuke, who had once rejected all emotions not because he was stronger, but because deep down he knew that if even he fell, the other 3 would never have a chance to return. That's why he was so determined to keep going. Although his body was exhausted in the brutal white snow, it wasn't just nature that threatened him. While moving through the frozen forest, Yusuke was ambushed by a strange creature, a type of monster similar to a snowman born from the harsh climate of this land. With a special skill from his chef class, he could see through the opponent's internal structure, thereby finding the fatal weak point. After a struggle utilizing all his knowledge, Yusuke defeated the enemy. However, just as that creature fell, miserable cries echoed from behind the loose snow. Some small creatures, seemingly the children of the one just defeated, rushed out, crying beside the cooling corpse. At that sight, Yusuke momentarily froze. However, aware that where he stood was not reality, where ethics and morality could deeply intervene. Despite the lingering fluctuation in his heart, he continued moving forward. Because the mission was not yet completed and time was still passing second by second. Although having overcome a difficult guilt in Yusuke's heart, worry persisted when thinking about the possibility that the entire group would die if they didn't complete the challenge before the deadline. That anxiety pressed heavily on his mind, making each next step more burdensome. While immersed in a chaotic mess of thoughts, he accidentally slipped and fell into a deep hole hidden among the thick snow. The unexpected fall gave him no time to react. He could only silently think that this time it might really be the end. After being swept by the freezing water current to a deeper level below the ground, Yusuke fortunately didn't lose his life. Instead of being frozen in ice and snow like the others, he fell into a cave with a warmer temperature, enough to maintain life for a short time. And as consciousness gradually returned, the first sensation that overwhelmed him wasn't pain, but confusion, as there was no sign of any exit around. While trying to find a way out of the area full of thin ice, floating hazily on the solidified water surface, he accidentally discovered an ancient village submerged underwater, where a civilization had been buried underground long ago. That scene evoked a mysterious feeling, both familiar and strange, as if some ancient memory was being awakened. Not long after, he discovered his body couldn't endure anymore. The warm temperature was only temporary. The body losing strength in an oxygen-deficient environment meant Yuka couldn't resist. Before she could leave the dangerous area, she became exhausted and fell, becoming the second person in the group to cease life in this harsh game world. At the same time, Yusuke was groping through a dark cave system where all directions lead to deadlock. When it seemed he would be forever imprisoned in this maze of earth and stone, he encountered a giant worm specialized in digging earth to find new paths. With a faint hope, Shindo decided to follow it, thinking he might rely on its digging habits to escape outside. However, surprise struck while following the path that creature left behind. Unexpectedly from behind, another monster lunged forward to attack. In the narrow and dark space, resistance was almost impossible. He was swallowed in an instant, completely disappearing into the stomach of that terrible creature. Being digested meant the body couldn't maintain its state of existence, rendering the resurrection feature in the game world ineffective. At that moment, Yuka was the only one with enough strength to withstand both weather conditions and monsters. She understood that her group was facing complete failure. She had collapsed from the cold, Shindo couldn't survive under the ice layer, and Yusuke had been swallowed by the monster. The three companions could no longer return. None of them had sufficient conditions to be resurrected anymore because their bodies were either destroyed or completely frozen. Alone in the cruel, freezing world, Yuka understood clearly that just one more mistake. Not only would this mission fail, but the virtual lives of the entire group would also permanently end in the cruel world they were forced to be attached to. In a daze amid the harsh weather, her mind hazily wove images of unknown characters who had been inspirations in her life. Those figures, like blurry illusions in the dream, raised voiceless words of encouragement, urging her to continue moving forward, despite unclear reasons. With distant eyes, she staggered in the thick snow, her mind empty, only a fragile will holding on to a bit of clarity. Everything seemed about to end as her body gradually lost heat. At that moment, near the edge, a human figure appeared in the white snow. A girl with a strange appearance and distinctive cat ears, a feature not belonging to normal humans. She wasn't a villager, nor an enemy, but a player like Yuka. That girl's name was Glenda, a wind element mage who possessed magical skills that could control the wind. Recognizing that Yuka was in a state of exhaustion, Glenda didn't hesitate to use magic to help her accelerate, shortening the remaining distance to the mission completion point. Although not part of the same group, Glenda understood the importance of time for this dying player. If delayed, everything would turn to smoke. Thanks to that sudden and miraculous help, the group of four, Yusuke, Yotsuya, Kusue, Shindo, and Yuka finally reached the finish line, right at the allowed time limit. No one could believe that things could be reversed like that, especially when three of them had fallen into a suspended state, seemingly with no chance to return. Although just resurrected and having crossed the boundary between life and death in the snowstorm, Yusuke didn't let emotions overwhelm reason. He directed his attention to the game master, the person who supervised the entire process, who created those strange, absurd mission chains. The only question that appeared in his mind at this moment wasn't about rewards or the next part, but about the true nature of the world where they existed. He wanted to know whether everything was essentially like a virtual reality game or something far beyond imagination. The Game Master's answer stunned everyone. Unlike what they had assumed, this place wasn't simply a virtual world simulation built by artificial intelligence. This was a parallel world existing simultaneously with the real Earth. An independent dimension operating according to its own laws where time passed similar to the real world. According to the Game Master, each time humans made different decisions, even the smallest choice, a new branch of reality was born. That reality cross-split, forming countless parallel universes. And where they were standing now was one of them. That truth was like a strong blow to the minds of both Yuka and Yusuke. Especially for Yusuke, who had once set fire to burn a soldier alive in a previous mission to create a fake crime scene in order to save innocent prisoners. That action, if considered by the logic of the game, could be seen as a reasonable strategy. But when hearing that he actually was like a person in a real world with no shelter of simulation, that meant he had just killed a real life. Immediately after the mission ended, the entire group was instantly brought back to the real world, where they were still high school students with many everyday concerns. When everything temporarily calmed down, Yusuke sent a message to Shindo to report all the developments that occurred in this mission. And everything that happened in the parallel world was still imprinted in his mind, especially the moment when he had to burn a life with his own hands, knowing clearly there was only one way to complete the mission. However, the awareness that the person he eliminated wasn't simply a virtual character, but a living creature with real flesh and blood caused Yusuke's spirit to fall into a state of serious disorder in everyone's eyes. He was trying to hide his true feelings with prolonged silence. No one in the group knew how to speak, comfort, or pull him out of that dense black space. The school that once made Yusuke feel strange now has become even more lonely. Not a warm enough gaze. No words touched his inner self. It seemed everything around became an empty echo. He himself also began to question who he was and what his true role was in that world. What reason made him chosen only to then have to end another's life? While immersed in a series of repetitive thoughts, Yusuke unexpectedly received a message from the Game Master. Not a command or new information, just a simple question with full damage. Tell me your true feelings when ending a life. Just one line. But it made Yusuke's entire body shake, feeling as if every cell in his body contracted. Right after that, without a word in reply, he deleted the message and put the phone in his pocket. While walking home, trying not to think about anything more, Yusuke suddenly met a strange girl right in his room. That person wore a quite large straw hat obscuring most of her face, making that image vaguely reminiscent of someone in his dim memory. Her voice echoed in the empty room. She blamed him for deleting the message before thinking carefully. This sudden appearance made Yusuke suspicious that the person before him might be the Game Master. Although not directly answering Yusuke's question, that girl still displayed profound knowledge about the parallel world they had participated in. The way she talked, the way she gave opinions, all bore the appearance of an intelligence far beyond ordinary humans. When he asked again about real feelings after facing a life which was not just a character created by programming, she didn't avoid it. Instead, she made him face himself. Yusuke admitted that if he had clearly understood from the beginning that these creatures truly lived in the real world, he wouldn't have chosen to end them. He realized that choice was a wound not yet healed, something that tore his conscience apart every night. The conversation didn't extend further. That girl suggested he should temporarily set aside complicated thoughts to focus on what was ahead, because right now Yusuke had to meet the next player on the mission list. Not long after, she led him to a small Chinese restaurant located in a corner of the street with an old-looking exterior, the sign blurred by the dust of time. Before entering, the girl announced that in less than half a minute, the next player would officially appear. He was exactly a new player, only 14 years old in the real world. He was drawn into a chaotic life by his brother, who was exploited by a criminal organization. Despite his young age, his eyes were full of gloom and indignation. Given the opportunity, he would immediately act to punish those who had driven his family to the edge. The real challenge this time was how to persuade him to abandon his intention to kill. He had to help him realize that his current anger was just a sophisticated trap set up by the wicked to manipulate both him and his loved ones. And as soon as Yusuke and the Game Master entered the Chinese restaurant where the two brothers were meeting their enemy, the situation immediately became tense. A man with a rugged appearance, the leader of a criminal gang, appeared behind the kitchen counter. His presence made the atmosphere heavier than ever. In that brief moment, Yusuke realized he had to act quickly, as everything could fall apart in the blink of an eye. The young boy had moved close, his eyes burning with vengeance, while his brother tremblingly held onto the knife in his hand as if he could stab at any moment. That man clearly sensed the threat, immediately drew a gun and pointed it straight at the boy's head. a gesture showing brutality and indifference. Faced with that situation, Yusuke quickly rushed forwards, stopping the two brothers from an act that would completely ruin their lives. At this point, an object from the parallel world unexpectedly appeared. A magic glove created from the special power of the mission world. Seeing the opportunity, he quickly put it on, activating the skill to slow down the metabolic process, a type of power that only existed in extraordinary circumstances. As soon as the power was activated, all movements in space seemed to slow down, creating conditions for Yusuke to deliver an accurate kick to the criminal's hand, causing the gun to fall to the floor. The police force was called and immediately rushed into the restaurant. While chaos still lingered in the air, the boss was arrested and the two brothers were led out of the dangerous place under Yusuke's protection. After everything concluded, Yusuke recalled the Game Master's earlier question about how it felt to take away a human life. Now, when faced with the reality that he had just saved someone from becoming a murderer, he could clearly answer that only when his actions were guided by righteousness could they move forward without being engulfed by the darkness of guilt. From that moment, Yusuke was no longer an aimless teenager in the vortex of ethics. He began to form in his heart a belief that if he still had the ability to act for what was right then, even as just an ordinary person, he could still create change. Today was like an important turning point for Yusuke, a rare opportunity for him to complete the unfinished mission while helping his teammates in the hero group before the adverse challenge of the next week. Things followed each other with purpose, like the previous guidance of the Game Master, who had advised Yusuke to open his heart to connect with Kusue, Hakozaki, and other members. The strange thing here was that although alone in the final moment in the snow mission, it was Yuka who lifted the team's spirit, overcoming adversity with rare determination and faith. Yusuke's thoughts at that time also gradually changed. The concept of the value of life was no longer simply about life or death. The parallel world where the Game Master sent them was now not just a battlefield to complete missions. It was also like a land of salvation for the soul, where they could shed pain to reshape themselves. If they returned to reality after experiencing all the vicissitudes in this world, they would no longer be the same people. Someone who once lived in fear, like Shindo, could now face everything with calmness. Kusue, the weak girl who was once self-conscious about her physique, now became more steadfast. And Yuka, from a shy girl who avoided society, now dared to stand up for what she believed in. Therefore, Yusuke clearly understood that saving them in the mission world wasn't simply helping the group survive until the next week. It was also a way to increase the chance for each of them to live meaningfully in the life they deserved. A journey of growth and self-rebirth. No one could know for sure what would happen next. The future was always an unpredictable variable. Yusuke didn't consider himself a hero or someone with a noble mission. He was just a high school student who once lived in seclusion, now trying to walk with the belief that if acting for righteousness even just once, then he had made life more meaningful. Thanks for watching. Want more anime recaps? Subscribe to channels and turn on the notification bell. See you later. Watch those next videos.